Hello, today is Good Friday. This is Reverend Maureen. I'm going to be doing a meditation for the next half hour. I've entitled my meditation, "And the Angels Were Silent." And what will happen is when you hear those phrases or that phrase, "and the angels were silent," there will be a minute in actual fact, while you can reflect for yourself. And then I will return. So we begin. And the angels were silent. If you went to see a dramatic play, nothing could be more poignant than this. The stage is set. There is a hill, Golgotha. There are 3 crosses on the hill, waiting for those who will be crucified. There are soldiers and onlookers all around. Our focus is on the middle cross, where Jesus, who had claimed to be the Son of God, would die. For that claim, which many said was blasphemy or heresy, he would die. Even though that claim was only ever made under duress, time and time again, Jesus would say, "I am the Son of Man." But little did they know that his death was part of a divine plan. The journey to the cross had begun long before. 33 times Jesus had predicted his own death, and so the angels were silent. Many things happened that week. Many people ignored what was going on, or in fact delighted in it. Priests were accusing, civic leaders were prepared to sign death decrees, religious leaders, the Pharisees, were cowards, dice were being rolled, money changers in the temple courts were jubilant. They had not liked being banished when Jesus had said, "My house will be a house of prayer, and not a den of robbers." And of course, disciples both denied him and slept when he needed them most. And the angels were silent. And so he was at supper with his disciples for the last time. Jesus told them that one of them would betray him, and each one replied, "Surely not me, Lord." Even though Jesus knew exactly who would betray him, he did not outright identify him, and the angels were silent. But Jesus himself, fully human and fully divine, of course, had moments of self-doubt. Praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me." But he countered this thought with, "Yet not as I will, but as you will." Jesus was obedient unto death, and the angels were silent. And you would think his disciples would be there for him in all things, in his hour of need. In Gethsemane, when Jesus went to pray, they all fell asleep. "Will you not watch with me for just 1 hour?" he said. Increasingly, he knew he had no one really to rely on except his Father, and the angels were silent. Now Judas, one of Jesus' disciples, arrived with a large crowd of people, flaunting their clubs and their swords. Having secretly arranged a signal with these people, Judas went to Jesus and kissed him. Then the people seized Jesus and arrested him, and the angels were silent. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter sat alone, and a servant girl recognized him as one of the followers of Jesus. Peter had told Jesus, "Even if they all fall away on account of you, I never will." But when the time came, Peter denied knowing Jesus. "I don't know that man," he said. The men who were guarding Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and demanded, "Prophesy, who hit you?" And they said many other insulting things to him. And the angels were silent. The people accused Jesus at the very least of subversion and demanded that Pilate do something about it. But Pilate, coward that he was, passed the buck on to Herod. Herod and his soldiers mocked Jesus some more and eventually shunted him back to Pilate. Neither Herod nor Pilate wanted to take the responsibility for punishing Jesus, especially as the crowd were baying for his blood. "Crucify him," they shouted, and "We have no king but Caesar." And the angels were silent. The soldiers were tasked with flogging Jesus and taking him to be crucified. They put a scarlet robe on him, a crown of thorns on his head, and a staff in his right hand. They spit on Jesus and struck him on the head again and again and again. And then they led him away to be crucified. Jesus, now bloodied, torn, and worn, had difficulty carrying the heavy cross they had put on him. The soldiers seized a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, and made him carry it to Golgotha, the place of the skull, where Jesus would be crucified. And the angels were silent. Once on the cross, his hands and feet fixed with crude nails hammered into his body, his torn body pulling away from the cross, bit by bit, waves of pain by excruciating pain, especially when the soldiers pierced his side and tore it open. Then they offered Jesus wine mixed with gall. On tasting its bitterness, Jesus refused to drink it. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. 2 other men, both criminals, were led out with him to be executed, one on his right and one on his left. Even then, as the soldiers divided up his clothes and cast lots for them, Jesus was able to say, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And the angels were silent. The rulers and the people stood watching, and they mocked and insulted Jesus yet again. He saved others, let him save himself, if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one. And again, if he is the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now, if he wants him. For this man said, "I am the Son of God." One of the criminals beside him also taunted, "Aren't you the Messiah? So save yourself and us." But the other criminal accused him of not being a God-fearing man and admitted that they were both being justly punished for their wrongdoing. Turning to Jesus, he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And the angels were silent. At about noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. The sun had stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" At the point of death, Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He breathed his last and said, "It is finished." And the angels were silent. But even in his death, Jesus had a profound effect on people. A soldier began praising God, and looking up at Jesus said, "Surely this was a righteous man." Many of the people began to beat their breasts as they walked away. Those who knew Jesus, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things. But the angels were silent. But the drama had not ended, although you will not find this depicted in Holy Scripture, but it seems obvious. We know that at the foot of the cross stood Mary, his mother, Salome, who was the sister of Mary, Mary, the mother of Clopas, John, Jesus' faithful disciple whom he loved, and then Mary Magdalene. Mary, Jesus' mother, was keening. My son, what have they done to you?" Quietly, she said to herself, "This is my son, whom I carried in my womb, my precious gift from God." She sat quietly, tears running down her face, remembering when she and Joseph took Jesus for his dedication in the temple as a young boy. She remembered the old and blind Simeon in the temple, taking the boy Jesus into his arms and saying, "Lord, now you let your servant depart in peace. Your word has been fulfilled. My eyes have seen the salvation of your people Israel, a light to the nations and the glory of your people Israel." But mostly Mary remembered Simeon saying to her, "And, in other words, a sword will pierce your own soul because of this child." "But this pain," Mary says through her tears, "surely this pain will kill me also. Surely my life is over. I have no future." As she looked at on the bloody body of her son, she cried again, "This is my son. They have killed my son. My son. My son. My son," she cried, now almost delirious with pain and shock. And yet the angels were silent. And so the drama comes to an end. Why did the angels keep their silence, you might ask? Was it because they knew that when Jesus walked into Jerusalem, he knew he had the promise of God in his heart? Was it because, as Matthew said, he came to serve others and to give up his life as a ransom for many? Was it perhaps because Jesus knew he could rely on you, on me, on us, that there would be a kingdom to come on earth as it was in heaven, that the drama would not end because we, you and I, would stand in the gap for him, even though there would be times when, knowing God's will, we were too lazy or too distracted to obey him? Was it because we said, "Here I am, Lord, send me," and then put it on a back burner? But when reality returned, we knew we had lost a precious chance to be used by God. Was it because, knowing our selfishness, God would accept our small acts of loyalty and charity, hoping that it would encourage us to do more, to do greater things? Maybe because God never gives up on us, even when we give up on ourselves. There's always a new moment, a new day, a new hour, when he will prompt us saying, "My child, this is what I want you to do." In other words, was it because these celestial beings belong to God and not to us, and unless God told them to break the silence, they would not? Or was it because a day would come when all these things would fall into place, when those who would endure would be saved, the gospel would be preached, and the end would come when God wills it to happen? Again, as Jesus said in Matthew's gospel, if you believe what you ask for in prayer, it will happen. And the angels were silent. Most of us are questioning why this coronavirus has happened, why so many people worldwide have been infected, and why so many people have died. Perhaps, or surely, this is God giving us a chance to look at the bigger picture. Maybe God is encouraging us to accept that for so long we have made materialism and consumerism our God, that the opinion of others has meant more to us than God's opinion. Maybe because we have blinded ourselves to reality with binge-watching TV, living vicariously in the lives of others we see on the screen. It's a sad indictment on us that many of our children know the names of all the Kardashians, but not all their multiplication tables. Even maybe especially in South Africa, where there is so much poverty, so much inequality, God is wanting to have the last word, to be obeyed every day, and not just on Sunday when we go to church, when we religiously go to church. What good is religion if it does not make us better people, better human beings, people who live in the community, constantly aware of the needs of others, especially the elderly in our midst? And we wonder why some people in townships don't want to obey the lockdown regulations. Much of the time I find myself thinking, why should they? Maybe they are saying to themselves, when you live cheek by jowl, even 12 to a room, nothing worse can happen. When you have no food and you see your children crying and wasting away with disease, you don't care anymore, even if it means you will die. Maybe when your wife has had 6 children and is constantly tired and sick, maybe others will notice and help. Maybe when we have a fair and just government, leaders who are not corrupt and use their position merely for their own benefit, especially at the local and provincial levels. Maybe when we have access to better education and hospitals. Maybe when others are more concerned about us rather than themselves. Maybe when all you want is a job and a roof over your head, and to give your family and yourself the dignity they deserve. Maybe then we will have the dignity we deserve, not just on a piece of paper called the Constitution, but a lived dignity, meaningful change in the lives of the poor and downtrodden. Maybe then, just perhaps, the angels will no longer be silent. I want to finish with a prayer which is written anonymously. Jesus, where are you taking me? Into joy, into pain. I'm afraid, but to do anything other than go with you would be to die inwardly, and to look for wholeness apart from you would be to lose my true self. So I come to you, protesting and confused, but loving you all the same. You will have to hold on to me as we walk together through this compelling and frightening landscape of the kingdom of God. I want to say that this time of reflection and meditation has in many ways been a difficult one for me, and I guess for many of you it will be the same. It's a very difficult thing to process what Jesus did for you, for me, for all of us. But our God reigns. Over and over and over, our God reigns. And as I say goodbye, I'm thinking of our Jewish friends as well as ourselves, because their Passover beginning tonight and our Easter will be one that none of us will ever forget. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord take care of you. May the Lord be kind to you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look on you with favor and give you peace. Amen.